Welcome into TYT's The Conversation. I'm your host, Adrienne Lawrence, and I have two incredible guests for you this week, as I often bring incredible guests, but hey, those are the ropes. And the first one is Dr. Maytha Alhassen. You may know her because she's often on TYT hosting. She is a race and social justice professor, also a Hollywood writer, and as we all know, TYT host. Maytha, thank you so much for joining us.
I can't believe we get to have this conversation together.
I know, and also we got the black tank.
We didn't
memo.
plan this.
No,
we
didn't
didn't plan this at all. This is not like educated woman of color, secret society gear at all.
It's just how we roll. And I want to roll into the topics to discuss today just because I love your mind and I want to really have these discussions and conversations because I know you enlighten. Let's talk about masks. It shows that 16% of US adults are hardly ever, or if ever have worn a mask inside of a store or a business. And recently we had a 35-year-old man in Pennsylvania essentially pull a gun and shoot up a grocery store clerk, as well as turn it on 7 officers in a shootout later, all over him not wanting to wear a mask. And his lawyer, of course, said he's just not handling the pandemic well. We've noticed from this trend, it seems like it's oftentimes a lot of white people being in these altercations and engaged in violence and this pushback. Why do you think that is the case?
We saw the stark difference between how organizing looks like and for what end. At the capitals of most of these states, in Michigan, even in California, when you had people in riot gear, citizens responding to mask orders and opening up the economy and barging the Capitol as well. But then when you had Black Lives Matter protests, which most of the folks there were wearing masks, they were largely just rallies, basically. There was no weapons. And for some reason, this administration decides that they need to unleash undercover cops, undercover patrol in Portland and parts of the Northwest to go after those folks. And so what we're seeing is a really deep fear of white folks, of the idea of being policed or having any sort of infringement on what they perceive to be their legitimate rights. But we can take that a theoretical step further. And in America, there's this concept or this dual concept of negative freedom and positive freedom. So what a lot of these white folks who adhere to this philosophy of libertarianism like to say is that any of this tramples on their freedom. Like wearing a cloth mask for some reason feels incredibly oppressive, more oppressive than the idea of dying disproportionately from a virus. And so that is something that's rooted in what is called negative freedom, which is do not infringe on my rights. And as long as the government does that, then they are threatening my liberty. So that's how it's framed for them. But the only problem is, like, if you really believe in that, then you would be the ones who would support the defunding of police. You would be the one who would be supporting the defunding of any national or state security response. But ironically, they don't have a problem with those things. They just have a problem with being told that they have to wear a mask. And the other funny part of this story is that they will side with the rights of small businesses to regulate who can come in, and it's their right, the right of a cake store to be able to refuse service from queer folks for a cake with 2 married men. They're okay with that. But tell somebody if you enter my store, you have to wear a mask, then somehow it's a problem.
Yeah, and it seems, and definitely not saying that it's only white people. It's just the videos that have gone viral and these stories that have come out, it all seem to be very similar. And we've also seen a lot of pushback coming from places like Orange County and the areas down there that tend to be predominantly white as well. And I think you make a really good point in terms of, I think you said negative freedom versus positive freedoms. But I also want to kind of dive into the fact that why necessarily ride to violence and to go to this level of, I don't know necessarily if this 35-year-old man had any kind of history in any way, but to the point of violence, it just seems so absurd. The woman in Target ripping the mask and all the cloths down. Why feel the need to go that far?
Well, also my question is, why is that kind of violence acceptable? And why is that kind of violence not repudiated? Because here we have a deep paranoid suspicion of any Black protest turning violent, when it never does. And it's usually the cops that are the ones that make it violent, throwing the tear gas first, being provocative first, shooting with rubber bullets. But then when white folks do it, it's framed as defense, right? And Correct. So instead of it being framed as these are criminalized bodies walking around, they are the ones who are defending their freedom. So here we can understand how racialized it is. It's sadly really about how is your body racialized? And for a long period of time, there has been work towards racializing Black folks as being threatening and their bodies being threatening. And to just clearly wrap this up, when Darren Wilson, who was accused of murdering Michael Brown, was asked if he saw Michael Brown carry a weapon, he said, yes, his body. And so that tells you everything you need to know about the divergence between how Black folks and white folks, and then there's a whole spectrum in between, but that's a whole nother conversation, are treated when it comes to violent responses.
Absolutely, and kind of, again, like you said, this thought that your body is a threat, because essentially when we look in this bit larger, like COVID-19 kind of ideology of the fact that your body is a walking threat, if you have this virus and don't know about it. So, as a people who've always been considered a threat, I'm kind of used to this thought of others being somewhat fearful of me. And maybe the white population is somewhat acclimating to that place, who knows? I don't know, but I do know that you are doing incredible work outside of just the professor element, and you are bringing your specialty to Hollywood. You are writing for Ramy, and that is now an Emmy-nominated show, already has a Golden Globe and a Peabody. What are you doing on that show? Because we know you are definitely changing the game.
It's such an interesting transition growing up in Los Angeles, where people who are born and raised here don't really interact with the industry to the degree people expect us to. And somehow I fell into doing this Hollywood work of starting out as the consultant with the red pen on the scripts. And then at a certain point I spoke to Ramy, he's a friend of mine. That's how I initially was introduced to this opportunity to be part of the Hulu show you mentioned, Ramy. And I said, it's interesting being able to give my notes, but I really want to develop story, because that's at the heart of how we shift and change narratives about us. And I don't want to just come in and say, that's wrong, do it this way. But what are the motivations of a character? What are things we've never seen before? How can we pull this together in a season and an arc of a season? So I came in season 1 as a creative advisor, and season 2, I got pulled into the writer's room, which is such an amazing experience. I tell folks that it feels like I got paid to take a master class in writing.
And have you found that, because you come from a professorial circle and, doctorates and books and eloquence, have you found that the writing technique and style is totally different?
Oh, absolutely. I'm trained to deconstruct stereotypes, tropes, political analysis. And then here I am being asked to construct, to build something. That's a whole new skill set. But I'm also pulling back and realizing Ramy and I worked on a script in season 2, and he looked at me in some of the dialogue and he said, Maytha, this is not how real people talk. This sounds like
it sounds like a phone conversation between me and you, I'm sure.
Right, obviously. But it also sounds like somebody who is sitting on a panel at an academic conference, waxing poetic on migrant children at the border. How would you talk if you were in a situation, spoiler alert, in a tow truck where your life is being threatened? You might not be the most eloquent, and you might be driven from a place of emotion. So what does it look like when real people are talking and in a situation that is emotionally taxing and pushing you to the edge. So yeah, I had to take off the analytical professorial brain and also the political commentator to say, what is the kind of grace I would give this moment and give this character?
Oh my God, even just hearing you talk about it sounds so powerful. And that's okay. I believe someday you're gonna be able to write a show that just focuses on brains sitting there and expounding, and I love it and I can't wait to watch it. But since we don't have very much time, what are you doing next?
Ooh, yay. Thank you for asking. I am working on a couple books. I'm working on a couple of scripted, unscripted projects I can't really talk about. So I'm in incubation phase. And I hopefully am going to be doing a lot more conversations on the Young Turks as well.
Right. Well, I look forward to that, my friend. And can you please tell everybody where they can find you?
www.Maytha, Maytha Alhassen, it's also down there, .com, if you don't know how to spell my name. And then at Maytha Alhassen on Twitter and Instagram. Follow me, talk to me. I'm a nerd. I love hearing your questions.
You are the best. Thank you so much for coming on, Maytha.
Thank you for having me.